All right. Well, good morning, everybody, and thanks again for joining us online. My name is Jim. I'm one of the pastors here at Forestbrook, and I just opened my door to see what it was like, and I just said nope. And I'm thankful for my friends here. We've got Elizabeth, Matthew, and Roxanne, who are all part of our Forestbrook community. And I'm just going to give them a moment to describe or explain what they do and where they are contributing their efforts in our society. All right, go for it. Elizabeth, you can start.
Good morning. I'm Elizabeth Pierce. I am a registered social worker by training and have worked since '96 in Durham region, providing all kinds of therapy and also more recently in a place of leadership in an organization in the community.
All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Roxanne Francis, and I am a registered social worker, and I practice psychotherapy in my private practice that I operate here in Durham Region. And I've been doing this work now for not as long as Elizabeth, but maybe around 17 years. So yeah, that's what I do.
Hi everyone, I'm Matt. I like to play the drums if I look familiar. Um, I am a social worker that I worked in the community at Canadian Mental Health Association for a little while. In the past couple of years, I've joined Catholic Family Services and I work as a family psychotherapist there.
Awesome. So, just for those who are joining us online for the first time, or if you've just kind of connected within the last couple of weeks at Forestbrook, you'd know that we're doing a series on mental health and faith. And it was always our intention to end off the series, as we've done with many of the series at Forestbrook, in a conversation. And we really believe that conversation is one of the ways that God has gifted us as a community to not just talk, because that's one thing, but to actually flesh out ideas, to engage with the things that maybe the Spirit has been placing in your heart. And one of the opportunities that we gave, which was a really vulnerable exercise, was invited our community to ask questions, really, really difficult questions. Well, maybe not specifically difficult questions, but questions that they may have had about mental health and faith. And so that's what we're doing here today. And so if it wasn't for the weather, we would be in a panel at the church, sipping some coffee and cookies and eating cookies and talking about this. And so I just want to lay out the framework for today, and I really appreciate you guys coming out for this. And so the questions that have come in from our community, we've divided into three sections, and we're going to just go through them. The first one has to do with the idea of a supportive community, and what do you do around that when you think about mental health? We're going to shift into a theological sort of category afterwards about what does the Bible say, or what does our theology from the scriptures actually point out? And we're going to have a conversation around that. And then finally, we're going to end up with this idea of resources, right? As a community, how do we actually find good resources for, good care, if you will? And for that, I'm really appreciative of our friends here who are able to help out. So enough talking from me. I am going to ask these questions and facilitate this conversation. I'm just going to leave it open. So let's start off with this idea of the supportive community. We had a question that talked about this idea of feelings. Why is it so important to identify and to share our feelings?
I think it's important because if we don't share our feelings, then people can only assume how things are going for you. And we live in a society that is focused on pushing through and go, go, go and produce and, give it your all. And so, slay all day, all the things, right? And so everyone will just assume that everything is going well with you. And if that is actually not the case, and you are trying to produce while you are feeling sad, you are trying to parent and preach and take care of your work and go to school when you're flooded with anxiety, then um, it's going to impact what you can do, number one. But also you might wrestle with this sense of being fake, this dichotomy, this I am one way in this crowd, but privately I'm another way. And it's really important that we are able, maybe not to share all the things that are going on, but to be able to share what you are feeling so that people can understand if you're feeling something that's, not a happy feeling, then people can lend you support. If you are feeling a happy feeling, then that can help, that joy can provide levity or happiness for someone else who's not doing great, right? Um, we are human beings, and because of that, we were gifted with a whole plethora of different kinds of feelings that we can feel at any moment in time. And I don't think that it was designed for us to just mask and pretend that we are not feeling in any way, shape, or form.
I totally agree with all of that, Roxanne. I was thinking about how God gave us these feelings for a reason, and it is meant to offer us a way to navigate this world and to highlight when things are good and right for us and when things aren't good and aren't right for us. And saying about how, on a car there's like a dashboard full of lights, and it's the feeling or the lights are neutral, but it's what happens in response to them or what caused them that is the thing that needs the attention. And how if we don't identify what the feeling is and we don't um, sort of pursue what's going on underneath the feeling, then that's when problems can happen. Like if you keep ignoring that your car doesn't have enough oil, eventually your whole engine is going to seize up. And we have that same dynamic in our feelings as well. So not only does it help other people be there with you, but it also helps you take the best care of you that you possibly can, which is what God intended, which is why he gave us those feelings to start with.
Great.
I like it. Yeah, these feelings they're kind of there to compel us to connect with others, which is really
Mm.
interesting how, what you're talking about, Roxanne. Sometimes we live in a space where we try and tamp down the feelings. We're doing the opposite of what they're there to do.
I want to jump to the second question because I think I can imagine that there's quite a number of people who are caring for either aging parents or um, family members who are, struggling with health and just this wide spectrum and variety. How do you actually care for that? How do you actually perhaps even, manage or take care of these feelings as you're doing all of these things?
There is a reality to some of these very difficult situations that people find themselves in, and the way that this question is framed is it kind of we're looking at how much resources do we have to give and take care of other people, and um, it does start with kind of taking a note of slowing down, looking inward. How much resources do you actually have to give? Maybe you might need to be on the receiving end of reaching out and support and connecting to kind of fill you up. Um, because some of these people, like I can only imagine the reason why this question has come up is that some people are in some incredibly difficult, taxing, draining situations that um, you might feel like you need to take care of it alone, or you might, you soldier through without the resources to do it. It can be exhausting.
I agree with that, Matthew. I think about the analogy in the when you go on a flight where they tell you that if the oxygen masks drop, you need to put your own on first before you help the people around you, which is counterintuitive because if you're with someone that you really care about, your natural inclination is going to be to want to help your child or your friend or your family member with theirs. But if you don't have oxygen, if you can't breathe, you're not going to be able to help anybody else. And there's real importance in ensuring that as you are walking with someone, which is a beautiful, wonderful thing that you're doing, that you hear clearly that you matter just as much. And sometimes we can do this whole comparison thing of like, well, their situation is worse than mine, so I just have to like handle it or not worry so much about myself because I at least I'm not suffering with what they're suffering with. But it's not a game. It's not there's no comparison going on here. It's not an either or situation. Both people are equally as important and need the attention and care.
If you are caring for someone who's struggling with their mental health or you're caring for someone physically, it's really important that you try to get breaks when you can. Try to get a little bit of respite. If it's just you and there's no breaks, then you may want to do what you can to try to get some sleep. Do what you can to eat as healthy as you can. Make sure you're getting water. have someone that you can talk to, whether that's a therapist or someone at the church or a trusted advisor or best friend, just so that you can share. And it's okay to vent, to say, this is hard, or I don't like doing this, or I'm really, really worried. None of those things mean that you're a bad person, or that you aren't or that you don't love the person that you're caring for. I think all of these pieces, um, I think all of the things that have been said are very, very crucial. I also think it's important to take the best physical and emotional care of yourself as possible.
What if somebody, or when somebody says, I'm not doing okay, I'm not all right, or something that indicates that they're in distress? Um, I know, Roxanne, you kind of talked a little bit about the practical stuff, but what's a good approach or a helpful response to that?
The most important thing is to just start with a posture of I'm here with you in that. So a posture of listening. So, it's really courageous to come to a place where you acknowledge I don't feel okay. And it usually takes a lot to get yourself to a place where you're willing to invite someone in by disclosing that. And so when you're that person who's in that place of vulnerability, it feels so relieving when in response you hear, I'm going to stop what I'm doing and just sit with you and hear what's going on that makes you not feel okay, because that is the really powerful thing that we have to offer another human being. You don't have to be a therapist or trained in any way to just say, I'm going to join with you in this. In fact, they did a study once where they said that 60% of what has a strong impact in a therapeutic relationship is, in fact, when someone feels heard and understood. So everybody can offer that to another human being by listening, by reflecting back what you're hearing. I'm hearing you say this, and just not by judging, just by sitting with it, not trying to fix, just I'm here with you in that. That would be what I would suggest is the first place to start, is giving that permission and safety to honor that really courageous disclosure. And I'll stop now and let my friends join in.
Let me also throw in another question, which is part of this one, and which is a contrary, right? What are things to avoid saying or doing, right? Or response wise?
Yeah, I think an important reminder, it's like I when I'm in the therapy room or if I'm in my personal life, if that if someone is saying I'm not doing okay, like Elizabeth said, it takes a lot of courage, and it also is a reminder for me that this is something that has probably been going on for more than just today. Um, and if this has been something that this person has been living with for some time, um, they've probably tried to fix it. They're not looking for me to come in and fix it immediately. So it is a good reminder of this is not. I don't need to like panic or go into savior mode just because it's been present. And right now the first step is let's hear it. Let's be together with this thing that is difficult to share.
I think one of the things, by way of things not to do or say, I think it's important to not minimize, not to say, oh, that's nothing. I've
Mm.
got this and this and this going on, or all you need to do is A, B, C, D, E, or from a religious perspective, a Christian perspective, just pray it through. You don't have enough faith, right? We want to avoid some of those pieces. People are really struggling. Life is really hard. It feels like the world is on fire. And so when someone finally says, I'm not doing okay, they're really not doing okay. So the last thing you want to do is to compare it to your own life. The last thing you want to do is call them out for not having enough strength, for not being able to just push through. The last thing you want to do, if the person that you're speaking to is younger and you are older, regardless of generation, you don't want to say, when I was your age, I was able to handle stuff like that and more. I hear a lot of these young people can't handle anything. That's the last thing you want to say. That's the last thing that people want to hear. You just want to listen with compassion. Tell me more. I'm so glad you told me. Let's talk. Let me turn off the TV. Do you want to go for a walk so we can talk about this? You want to just create space for them to share more.
I would also say that once they've done that sharing piece, it's okay to check out with them what would be helpful for them as you walk this with them. So I'm here with you in this. So I'll be as in this or as not in this as you want me to be. So I can check in on you on a regular basis, or we can set up coffee chats, or do you need to be given space and you'll reach out to me, like checking out with them. And the answer might be, I actually don't know what I want or need. And that's an okay answer. And then your spot then is to just say, okay, then I'm going to do what I would do in response to be a caring friend and a support to you. And you can just tell me no thank you if it's not something you want. So you just create that permission and that space where you're acknowledging that you don't have the wisdom to necessarily know. And if they don't feel like they do either, that's okay. You'll navigate it together with open communication and safety to be authentic within that context.
There is a specific question that came in that actually has to do with what you're talking about, or in that same trajectory. And it goes this way. It says, if somebody shares that they have thoughts of self-harm, what should we as church people, church members, do in that moment, and perhaps not do in that moment?
We're all therapists and we're used to letting everybody else talk and just waiting to respond. So all three of us are going, oh, wait, one of us has to answer right now. I would say this is a good spring off of the conversation we were just having in terms of the space you start in, which is that posture of listening and giving opportunity for there to just be safety for disclosure. And, Roxanne's language around tell me more, and I really want to hear what's going on for you right now kind of language helps people to not feel judged when they say something like that. And to then just be able to create that safety for them to articulate, what does that mean? So, for some people, it means I have feelings of, I just don't want to be here anymore. And there's no concrete plan and there's no definition around it. It's more of an expression of the inward pain. And for other people, they have been thinking about the things that they might do because they're feeling so tormented inside. And so it kind of depends on what space you're in as to what exactly you do. Both kind of camps, one where it's more of thinking about, I can't take this, and the other, which is I actually have some thoughts about what I would do. They both require that same starting space that we've been talking about, which is the safety, the not, creating panic in your own self in response, but really just normalizing that it makes sense to me that you would be feeling so rotten given what you're going through. And, it's okay that you have these feelings. We'll figure this out together. Like that starting space is so crucial because it'll help reduce people's anxiety around, I've just said this big thing, and what does this person sitting across from me think about me now?
I think one of the things that we probably should not do, or in terms of avoid doing, is to create this huge panic. Of course, that is an alarming thing to hear. And if this is someone that you care about, you might not want to see them die. And so it can be frightening. But this person is sharing because they need to get something off their chest, right? And they trust you, which is why they've come to you. And so you want to use the value of that relationship to just talk with them more. How did you come to this conclusion? What has been going on for you? You don't want to, throw the Bible at them in the sense of, this is a sin, and they didn't come to you for a sermon. However, I will say that in Vilma's last message, she was talking about Elijah and how after, Mount Carmel, he was feeling depressed and longed to die. And one of the things that I loved about that scripture is that what he received was care from the Lord, right? Lay down, get something to eat. Now, that might not be the formula. Lay down and get something to eat. That might not be the formula for someone who comes to disclose. But what is important is the care, right? And then after, if when they talk to you, they share that this is something that is very imminent for me, you may want to ask, do you know how do you have we call it a plan? Do you have a plan? Do you have a method? Is there something, what were you planning to do? And if this is something that they can tell you that is very detailed, and they have a date, a time, like after this date, I will not be here, then you may want to say to them, how do you feel about coming with me to the doctor or to the emergency room? Right? Not in an alarmist way, but just in a way of preserving life, right? We, as therapists, we all know that once we call it a risk assessment. Once we assess that there is significant risk, then the next step is to get this person help, and not in an alarmist way, because that person will say, I'm never coming to you for anything again, right? But you want to provide care for their life, care for what they're going through, but care for the breath in their body as well. And so that might eventually look like um, going to the nearest emergency room, or maybe even calling 911.
Could I also just add, I agree with all of that, Roxanne, and I love how you gave permission to ask more and to get more information and details. One of the biggest myths is that if you ask about what they're thinking more, you'll make somebody feel more inclined to do the thing. And it's actually the opposite. So the more you cannot make someone want to hurt themselves or take their own life more by talking to them about it. That is a myth. And in fact, the more you create space and safety to have the conversation, that is actually a protective factor. So to just relieve yourselves of that worry that if I ask too much, will that maybe make them feel more inclined? There's tons of evidence and studies that have been done to prove that that is in fact just a myth.
Thank you so much, guys. That was really great. Um, so we're going to move on to just as you mentioned about Vilma, who preached last week about lament and the language of learning lament. We're going to move into a more theological section of conversation. And interestingly enough, there was some really good questions that came out of this. And I love these questions simply because they challenge some of the notions that we may have. And I love what you just said, Elizabeth, about those myths that we have. And so Vilma shared from Psalm 88 and along with the story in Second Kings about Elijah. But in that psalm, the writer blames God for his troubles. Is that a reasonable thing to do?
So I was just about to say, I'm not a preacher, but what
Actually,
what I will say is that God already knows what you're thinking, right? He already knows what you're thinking. He already knows what you're feeling. He made you. So you might as well tell him, right? I think that, and these are just my personal thoughts. I think that what God is interested in is communion with you. Not communion as in the bread and the cup, but communion as in conversation, connection. You opening your heart and your mouth and telling me what's going on for you. And so, when my children get angry, I tell them that they can pray angry prayers, right? God has his back is broad enough, his shoulders are big enough, and he can take it. In terms of blame, um, God is the author of the universe. He is the beginning and the end, and he might not have caused certain things, but he has allowed certain things to happen. And so your posture of blame might not necessarily be the most accurate, but I think what is most important is the communication with God about how you are feeling. And as we talk with him, which really is prayer, as we talk with him, that connection with him, he will supernaturally use that to shift our perspective.
great.
Absolutely. And Psalm 88 is not the only psalm where David is saying big, angry, hard feelings to God. He just circles back at the end, usually by saying, "But you're God, and so I'll trust you, and I'll walk with you." And I don't know, as you were talking, Roxanne, I was thinking about even Jesus said, my God, why have you forsaken me?" I mean, this is God in the form of the Son who knew the plan, who picked the plan, who was a willing and active participant in the plan, and yet still in that deep moment of torment, he was crying out to God with the feeling he had, which was that he felt like he was being abandoned, even though that's not true. He wasn't being forsaken by God in that moment at all. That wasn't the reality, but that's how it felt. And he expressed his heart to God in that moment, which is exactly what you were talking about. So, in my opinion, if it's okay for Jesus to do, it's probably okay for us to do.
It ties back to what you guys said about feelings at the start, right? The importance of feelings and how God created that. So, no, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think you're going into some very, very difficult territory if you're going to try and control your feelings completely. Um, there's a lot of intense emotional actions that you read in the Bible, and you can't go through life denying the feelings or having complete control of them. Um, that's it's very difficult.
I appreciate that because I think a mentor of mine once said, a mentor of mine said that even the person who is angry at God believes in God, right? So I think everything that you guys are saying just connects into that place, right? Of that. So let me shift to this other question that I think has, it goes this way. It says, how do you help people discern, or maybe the question would be, how would you discern, is this a spiritual struggle? Is this a mental illness? Is this a trauma response or all of the above? And so like, what does discernment look like in that case, right? Whether it's for us or for others.
I found this question interesting because I think what I hear being asked is if I can discern what the root cause is, then I can do something to help mitigate it in some way. I know how to then help. And I would just start with the foundation and we can layer on it. But the foundation is still what we talked about originally, which is that to help and to be in the right space, it's starting with that place of joining and presence and non-judgmental, and that it actually doesn't matter what the source of the torment is, the posture remains the same in terms of how we respond to it in the life of someone that's sharing with us. I also get that if you're the person struggling, you want to understand what is it, because then I know whether or not I'm going to my pastor or my therapist or my doctor. And, it's the Holy Spirit who gives us that wisdom. Like the discernment comes from the Holy Spirit. So from my perspective, it's about going before him with somebody or a few people who have a sense of being able to discern and to just pray and ask for God to reveal what should I be doing in response to this? How should I be moving forward? Are there things I can be doing that will help with X, Y, or Z? And let him be the author of that and inviting people in. It's cool that the questions have been layered this way because we sort of talked about how you have a supportive community, and then this is an example of why you need a supportive community because we're meant to be discerning together, not on our own.
Yeah, it's a complicated process, but I think the if we're stuck in shame or there's a pressure to hide our emotions or our turmoils or lament, then we don't start the process of searching for how do we be healthier, right? You know, as long as we start and we start seeking support or we start opening up the conversation, then we have a chance to figure out, do we tackle it? What form of health do we tackle this from?
I love that. I think, to Elizabeth's point, the root, we might not know right away what the source is or the root of the thing is. But what I think is really important is giving yourself the best option or the best opportunity to heal from the thing by trying to get as much support from different angles as possible.
Hmm.
If someone in your home is really, really, really physically ill and they're fighting this illness for a while, you will want to get as much help as you can. You'll see your doctor, maybe you'll go to the hospital. You'll also pray and you'll seek guidance from, church leaders. You'll read the Bible. You tackle it from different angles. And so it might be, a spiritual attack. It might be a mental health diagnosis. It might be something that you need medication for, or whatever it is, but we can still attack it from every angle, um, and and mitigate the effects of that, so you can get healthy. It might be a spiritual issue, but you still want to look into it from the aspect of getting a professional involved. And it might just be, a mental health issue and not a spiritual attack, but you will still seek spiritual guidance, prayer, search the scriptures, and talk to the Father, because I think the best approach is a rounded approach.
I love that. I love that idea of discernment in community together. I think that's a really great way of that answering that. I have one more question about the theological element, and this is more specific to a passage of scripture that is found in the New Testament, and it says the Bible says, "Do not worry." And this individual who submitted this question said, "Does it mean that I'm being disobedient if I have a lack of faith in that?" How would you answer that?
I'll try. Um, my answer, I'm sure, will be insufficient. So I'm glad there's three of us. I believe that the reminders in the Bible of not to worry are just that, reminders. I don't think that they're admonitions. Worry is a part of our protective mechanism, right? I think, well, how do I put this? Here's a popular example. If my kids go in the kitchen and put their hand on the hot stove and get burned, then they're going to be more cautious going into the kitchen. They might not worry about the kitchen, but they will be cautious. And I think that's it. I think the caution is important. Um, Human beings are prone to worry, which is why we have these reminders in the Bible that really God is in control and that we are to cast our every care on Him. He's got this. I think it's natural for us to be concerned about the thing. It's natural for us to even delve into the aspect of worry, but the constant reminders are for us to not um, spend our days bottled up with anxiety, because that in itself is not productive. That in itself is not where God wants us to live. And so there are these reminders not to worry. Finding yourself in a place of worry is not sinful, but the reminders are there because it's not the best frame of mind to have. It's not healthy for us to live in a place of worry.
I
Thank you.
love that, Roxanne. I feel like that is the core piece, is around the where, if we go into a space of worry where we then become consumed with the thing, that is, I think, what we're being encouraged to not engage in. And I feel like it's important to just acknowledge, I've been reading a lot about the word for sin, which is chada, which means just to miss the mark, right? So, and the whole idea is about learning how to hit the mark more. That's what our call is. The call to not sin is to learn how to hit the mark more. And so I think that when we've grown up in a space where we hear these do not do's, and if we do it, then we think there's something bad and wrong about us, we're actually missing the mark of what the whole point of all of the things. Like, this is a loving God who's trying to protect us, who's trying to care for us, who came to give us a full life. So does worrying give us a full life? It doesn't. So therefore, the call is, don't do that thing, try to do another thing. And is it disobedience if you worry? I don't think that's the question. I think the question is, how does worrying help me have the full life Jesus, who loves me, wants for me? And if it isn't giving me that, then that's something I want to find ways to detangle myself from. And that's really what so it's about a reminder of, this isn't the thing that gives you the full life. This is the thing that gives you the full life. So try to stay away from this stuff, because it's not going to be helpful for you. And if we stop thinking about things in terms of, I'm sinning if I do this and I'm good if I do this, if we change our mindset to being, where is the full life Jesus is calling me to, and how do these commands or encouragements create a space into that full life, I think it helps us then stay away from what Matthew talked about earlier, which is all of the shame that we end up carrying with us because we didn't do the right thing or because of what happened to us. And we start seeing ourselves as loved children of God as opposed to sinners, because our identity in Christ is that we are loved children of God.
Hmm.
And when I think of um, the first half, like the do not worry, and then we sometimes we get stuck on that. But the after is that because he cares for you, or because the birds they are sustained. Sometimes these things, like some of us are predisposed to be worrying, and these are reminders that, hey, there is there is a God that wants us to be, you know, trust in him and things like that. So there is a positive that comes after the do not worry. It's not always just focused on that you are disobedient if you don't do X, Y, and Z.
I love how you guys postured that, right? It's not just the act of worrying, as in like if you did this, you're okay. If you didn't, you're bad. It's actually an invitation to something much deeper. And you guys have been talking about this all along, right? It's the presence and the invitation into that relational thing. So thanks for that reminder, Matthew. We've got one last section, and I've got two more questions for you guys. And I think um, it's about resources, and I think what's really important is that with this series and with this entire year that we've been pointing our church to is just to learn what it is that God is teaching us. And I think this is a really important segment as well. So I'm going to get right into it. And the question is, does the counselor I have to see, so this is assuming that we're going to seek professional help. Does the counselor I have to see have to be a Christian in order to get the right help? And how do I find the right help?
Um, I think a good place to start is to give something a try, and then after a few meetings or sessions or phone calls or the intake process, you can trust a little bit of yourself and kind of how you're connecting with a person, to see if it's worth it, right? Sometimes people will say, "Oh, I don't really want to work with a male therapist," and then I'll tell them like, "Hey, like I can't change that. I am a male. Come and give it a try, do 2 or 3 sessions, and then you'll kind of see how your system reacts to that." And it'd be the same thing with spirituality. Um, a good therapist who maybe may not share the exact same beliefs or denomination of Christianity that you have. Um, if you are willing to take that step and seek help and give it a try, see how it works, and you can kind of trust your own judgment.
Before anybody else jumps in, Matt used the word intake. And just for those who might not be familiar with that, what what would that be?
A lot of places will do like a shortened meeting to kind of gather information, give an opportunity for you to kind of share a little bit about yourself, and then also to meet whoever you might be working with. It looks different based on what agencies you might be using, or what if you go to a private practice, or um, so it's just like the starting process to get information kind of out in the open. Also, if it's private practice, it's like you're shopping, you're a customer, right? You can go and feel out the therapist at an intake session, and often these sessions are not. Sometimes they're not even charged for. Like the intake is sometimes free in some places.
Okay.
I think one of the things, so it makes a lot of sense to me that there's a feeling of wanting the person you're going to go see share your faith, I understand why that's sort of a default posture for people. But I also think it's important to remember that we engage with professionals in all kinds of different disciplines who don't always share our faith, and we get fantastic help from them. And so, Matthew was saying earlier that a good therapist who doesn't necessarily share your faith, they're going to still create space for your faith. So that's what therapy is meant to be, client-centered, where you get to say what are some of your coping strategies? Well, one of them is my faith. Oh, tell me about that. What can that look like? How do you want that to be part of your sessions? That's what any good therapist will do. And if they don't do that with you, then I would say, do what Matthew said, trust your gut and move on to the next one. But because that is available, then it can help with things like if you can't afford private practice where you would engage with a Christian therapist, you can then go to a publicly funded organization to get the therapy part, and then get your spiritual care taken care of in the church and in your spiritual community. So you don't have to see someone who is a Christian to get really good therapy. Just like if you had cancer and you went to an oncologist, it would feel amazing if your oncologist shared your faith and would pray with you and talk with you about God's healing power in your cancer treatment process. But if they don't, you're still going to go see that really great oncologist who's going to help you with your cancer treatment, and you'll get the spiritual care elsewhere. And I would just encourage people to consider that dynamic can work really well in this mental health arena also.
Great. Let's just say I don't have any reason in my own self-assessment to need to go to see a therapist, right? Do I need to have something go on in order to, find somebody, right? So, I mean, I love the medical example you just gave about the oncologist, but just like how I'm getting older, I have to go for a physical. I might not think I need one, right? But I'm still going to go for one. Um, I guess what I'm asking is because with the mental health care side of it, it's not something that a lot of people have good maybe metrics to kind of gauge whether or not I need that or not, right? And Roxanne, you mentioned at the start, we live in hustle culture where like the speed is dialed up to like 100, right? So how maybe I don't know, right? Does that question make sense?
100%. One of the things I say often is, Elizabeth used the analogy earlier of a car, so I'm going to stick with that. If you have a vehicle, you do not want to wait until the wheels are falling off before you take it in for service, right? That is a very dangerous time. Not to say that it can't help you, but it will be a dangerous time. You want to go in on a fairly regular basis. It doesn't have to be every week. And I think the same is true for seeing a therapist. It doesn't mean that you're going to speak to someone because you have some kind of diagnosis or because your relationships are falling apart. Sometimes you can just go as a check in, right? And again, it doesn't have to be every week. But I think having an objective person who doesn't have skin in the game, who is not your cousin, who is not your best friend, who is not your auntie, who can look at your life objectively and, offer advice, offer support. Again, because we live in, like, have you seen the news lately? It is just watching the news is enough to make you feel exhausted. And being able to just take a breath and put things down just for an hour. Can you imagine having someone's complete, undivided attention for an hour or 50 minutes, who is objective, who gives you what we call unconditional positive regard. They think positively of you no matter what, right? Who is on your side. That is very, very valuable. I talk to a lot of people, just regular friends of mine. And when I say, how are you doing? They say, I'm tired, right? I'm physically tired. My brain is tired. My heart is tired. And, sometimes we feel like we need to be struggling with bipolar disorder before we go and see a therapist. Actually, sometimes we just need a checkup, and that's okay.
So last question, and this was actually one of the first questions that came in when we asked and invited this conversation. Uh, what happens when 911 or our health system just doesn't help? Then what?
I work in a publicly funded agency, CFSD, which actually isn't part of the health system. So I would put out there that there are more places to be seeking support from than only the health system and then only the emergency first responding kind of places. In fact, 911 is meant to respond to a crisis. It's not meant to respond to chronic situations. And the health system is actually meant to be set up for kind of like, well, if you think about a hospital, right? Like a hospital is set up for a certain kind of health or mental health need, but there are so many other, it's like a continuum, right? And there are other places along that continuum that can be fantastic resources. And the problem is if we are only looking to one place, if we're looking over here, but actually the answer is over here, then it's always going to feel like we're hitting a brick wall. Because mental health is so varied, responses to mental health and addictions also need to be varied. So there isn't a one-stop shop or a one-way fits all kind of thing. And so I would just encourage anyone who feels like they keep bumping up against a wall that perhaps maybe doing what Roxanne said around connecting with someone who can objectively help you process and think through what could be a good next step, what might be the next way to go. So there are like community agencies like CMHA that Matthew mentioned earlier, or Durham Mental Health Services that are sort of provide really strong case management support that can help you figure out what else do I need? And then they can actually help you connect with those what else do I need things. And so that's a good place to start, or even going to your doctor is a good place to start to find out what options are in your community that might be valuable for you. So those would be two things I would just say as starting places.
Right.
Yeah, if you're finding yourself being overwhelmed by the navigation of like the mental health system or physical health system, it is very overwhelming and convoluted. And sometimes having someone that's been in it, that's communicated to these kinds of peoples before, whether that be through like a community mental health agency or starting with your general practitioner, um, it's not designed to be like carefree and easy and feel good. You're not alone in that. You're not doing anything wrong. You're not failing at navigating it. It is legitimately very difficult to do. Um, so yes, please uh, seek counsel or advice of someone that maybe has kind of been around it, because it is very, especially if it's your first time going through some of these crises, it's really difficult.
I just want to say, in agreement with Matthew and Elizabeth, we live in a world that is very challenging. We live and navigate very challenging systems. And when I say systems, I mean, how do I put this? Our health services are not set up, as Elizabeth mentioned, to necessarily provide the care that you might be seeking, particularly around mental health. So, for example, let's pick anxiety or depression, right? If you have symptoms of something like this, it could be caused by, job stress, relationships in your family, how you were raised, immigration. It can be caused by a lot of things that are systemic in nature. And when you go into our health system, which is a system in itself, you are unlikely to have someone say to you, "Tell me about your family." If you go to the doctor or if you call 911, you are unlikely to have someone say, "What has your life been like in the past 5 years?" It's unlikely that you're going to hear all of these things because um, this is not how they've been trained. And so the help that you seek might not be accessible in some of these places. And so I would highly recommend looking into some of the places that Elizabeth mentioned, or you know, walking into a community center and asking for resources. Maybe the church can gather some resources and you can call in and ask for some community resources, because some of our health systems are designed to keep you alive and functioning. They are, you go in for 15 minutes, you leave with a prescription, but the kind of care that you need might be quite more nuanced than that. And so I don't want you to feel like the health system is failing you, because they're doing what they were designed to do. And you might need different support.
That's great. Well, I really appreciate all of this. I mean, I hope as you're watching this, whenever you're watching this, that this is just something that you can digest as we've had this conversation. Um, I've said this to several people. By my count, at Forest Brook, we have around 9 practitioners in therapy, counseling, and social services. And what a gift it is to the church, right? And so even right now, I really appreciate you guys sharing what you have, and I'm really hoping that as we continue this conversation outside of this time, that people's lives aren't just enriched, but they would seek to find flourishing in all sorts of different ways through the words of wisdom that you guys have given. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And what I'll do is also I'll make those resources available on the screen so that people who need to connect can connect. So thank you, everybody, and we'll say goodbye from here.